Welcome back, folks. We're going to be continuing our work here in Module 5 tonight. We're going to move into Lab 3, and I'm going to be introducing you to a technology that's very important in programming called regular expressions, or as many of us in programming refer to it, RegEx, right? That's kind of like the shortcut way to say it. RegEx is not exclusive, by the way, to any particular programming language. It's actually a universal, like, I'll call it kind of like, I guess, a string testing library, so that when people type stuff into a program, we can validate that their input is valid. So any of the people that are moving, especially into the data program or the AI program, where you work a lot with databases, probably more than the other programs, one thing that's really important in a database is only good as the information that's put into it. So for example, if somebody asks you for your name, but you're snarky and you type a number, well, that's not valid. But yet there it is going into the database. So now the database is polluted with bad data. So bad data leads to bad data analysis. It leads to bad artificial intelligence. It leads to a bunch of bad things, right? So often programmers, especially when they write computer code that sits as a front end to writing stuff into a database, they often use this technology called RegEx to make sure that the data being entered is in the correct format. That includes numbers, letters, uppercase, lowercase, special symbols, etc. And it's got its own unique syntax. But what's neat about RegEx is it does apply to every programming language and databases. So for example, if I come up with a RegEx statement in Python, I probably have an identical one in Java, an identical one in JavaScript, an identical one in SQL when I'm creating a database. So that's why this technology is important. The fact that it's included in this class is because of the data program, by the way, here at WCTC. So once again, most programmers will call this RegEx because it's really just a shortened version of regular expression. And basically, as it says, it's a sequence of characters that forms a search pattern, right? And it's used to check if a string contains the specified search pattern. So for example, if I went to a website and I was asked to enter my social security number, what's the format for that? Well, it's 3 numbers, a dash, 2 numbers, a dash, and 4 numbers. Letters aren't allowed. Other special characters are not allowed, right? And so I can set up a pattern for the input of that data to make sure that what the user is typing matches that pattern. So then when I take that information and then insert it into a database or some sort of a data structure or into a program that is expecting it a certain way, it doesn't fail, right? So if my database would break, if the wrong kind of information would go into it, well, I want to make sure I put a regex expression in there to make sure that it's correct, right? So it's a way you can think of it as kind of looking through data to make sure it's in the right format and structure so that it doesn't break our program, doesn't break our database, and we can do the stuff that we're intending to do with it correctly. So for example, if I ask you to enter your income, I don't want you to type your name, right? And it's that kind of thing. So you can think of it in many different ways. Now, if we're going to use this inside of Python, this is one of the standard Python libraries. You just have to simply call the regular expression library by just simply saying import RE, and that's the shortcut for reg expression, right? And this is very typical of Python, by the way. They take those library names and shorten them up like that. All right. So the work that we're about to do is going to include that. In fact, because we're even going to add it to our helper file, we're going to include that in our helper file, by the way. So just to give you an example, and this is, I'm not going to ask you to latch your brain onto this, and don't worry, there's no test or anything. I will give you the code that you need to make it right. But if I was to see if somebody took and typed in a phrase, if the phrase starts with the and ends with Spain, this is the regular expression way to test it. That's the syntax for it. So I search for the text that's stored here, And then these weird characters that are thrown in here have special meaning. Like I'm trying to highlight just the special characters, but it's basically saying that it starts with the, and then there's a bunch of stuff in between, whatever it is, and then it ends with Spain, and this is kind of like the regex way of saying it. So kind of interesting, right? All right, so don't worry about the example on that. Regex has a bunch of functions built in. Um, there's a few that I think are more useful than others. The one that's probably the most useful in my mind is the search one, right? So where I set up a pattern, I define a pattern, and I search for it within a string of text to make sure that it's okay. And if it is, then we can press forward in our application, right? If it's not, then we can give them an error message or put it in a loop and ask them to re-enter it until it's correct, right? So enter your social security number, dog. Sorry, please try again. You just, and this is the mechanism for that. Another one that I think that's kind of useful is the split one. But I think most all of our examples here are going to be using the search thing. And by the way, when we're using something like this, often when we're using a function that's inside of a library, we're going to say the library name, which is going to be re dot search parentheses, and then our syntax goes inside. Some of this gets very complicated, by the way. Some is very simple, and you will get a taste of each. The complicated thing, I will show you, right? Or I'll basically give you the code. So they have all these different characters that they throw into the expressions. So for example, we'll see a lot of this, a set of characters. For example, they have a syntax to make sure it's like a lowercase letter. And basically it's square brackets with an A dot or A to Z inside of it. Or if it's uppercase letters, capital A to Z inside the square brackets. Very, very common. Probably the most common. You have the starts with and ends with characters. Any character except new line. And then they kind of go down the rabbit hole. I'm not expecting you to remember this in any way, shape, or form, right? But when you get into the data program, I would venture to guess that you probably will have to learn this stuff more and more. But what I tell all programmers is like, don't worry about memorizing this stuff. You can always look it up. And the beautiful thing about regex is this technology has been around, I think, since the 60s, right? The same exact formatting libraries that people have been using. And usually if you're like, regex statement to validate an email, you just Google it and then you'll find one. In fact, you'll probably find 20 of them and all of them work, right? With little nuances. The other one that we'll use a little bit is this one where we specify how many occurrences of something we need. So like we might say like enter 6 lowercase letters. And so we'll have like the square brackets and say A to Z and then curly brackets after it with a 6 in it so that we know that there's a range, so the format is declared, right? And I'll give you the example. Once again, don't stress out on it. They do have some of these special escape sequences. And you can read up on that if you want. Some of the expressions end up looking sort of like this, right? So all the lowercase, all the uppercase, any 2-digit numbers, with 0 to 5 and 0 to 9, etc. Right. That's really about all the information we're going to need to do this. And I will give you the syntax that you need as we kind of move forward, but I will also, in the form of notes, give you a bunch of notes here. So the first thing that we're going to do is let's do a little file management here. We're still working on the labs. I'm going to click on the lab folder here, and then I'm going to create a new file. This is module 5, lab 3. So name it appropriately, module 5, lab 3.py. First thing that we're going to do is we're going to import the regular expression library. So we're going to import RE. Notice we're not picking any particular function. We're importing all of it. So it's all at our disposal right now. From our helper function now, I'm going to add a function inside there. And you know what? I'm going to just do that right now because I think that it's going to be kind of helpful for you guys. So what I'm going to do is in that code share that we talked about before. So people watching this online, you're not going to have access to the code share. I apologize. That's the unfortunate reality of watching this stuff online. And I got to click back onto that URL. So I'm going to blow away your silly comments here. And here's the function that you can just copy verbatim and paste in. And if you look at line number 4 and how long and complicated and cryptic it is, you'll understand why I'm not having you type it in, because almost everybody would type it in wrong, at least partially. Right? And it would be really kind of a nightmare, frankly. So there's the function. Take that function and paste it into your helper file. So I have my helper file here. I'm just going to go to the end of it, go to the margin, and paste it in. Don't forget to save the helper. Big time saver right there. But once again, if you look at that one line and how long it is, right? It is really long and complicated, but basically what it does is it checks to see if an email is in the correct format. Now think about what an email address involves. It's some sort of a name at the beginning of it. It could have dots or dashes in it, could have upper or lowercase letters. Then there's an @ symbol, and then there's a string of text, and then a period, and then a string of text. Right? Yeah. And
can I interrupt?
Sure.
Where did you put the helper file? Above the import RE?
No. The helper file, Darla, is a standalone file in the same folder. And you weren't doing it like that in yours, but we had added that file in the previous labs. If you want, you can simply copy this function into your program. It will still work.
Okay, because I've got it now copied. I just didn't know to put it above this.
Yeah, it really ideally should be a separate file.
Okay.
Right. Now, for those of you that are noticing that that little RE statement here is flagging, because why? We're missing the import. So in the helper file at the top, you also have to import RE. Right. So the helper file needs that too, because otherwise the regular expression search won't work. What this will do, by the way, is it will check that complicated expression with a piece of data that we will send it, which is an email address, or hopefully an email address. And then as a result of that statement, it will return true or false. Therefore, the is match. So it will check to see, is the email format correct? If it is, it returns a true. If it doesn't, it returns a false. And if it returns a false, then we ask them to do it again, and the whole thing is in a loop. So this little code here prompts somebody for an email address and keeps prompting until they do one correctly. Pretty cool, right? Now, what I did mention in the assignment description, so if you go back to like the module, whatever the heck that is here, I do provide that code here, and we basically just created this bullet. Right? So that should be all be in the helper function. But if you wanted to create this statement from scratch, here's the code for it. Right? I just thought, I'm going to share it with you anyhow. I don't want you to sit there. I mean, because if you look at the syntax of this, it's not really very simple syntax. It's very, very complicated. Because in truth, an email address is a complicated thing. Right?
Did you say that we also have to put import re in the helper file?
Yes, you do.
That's in line 1?
Yeah, way at the top.
Okay.
Now, the other thing that I will tell you, like once again, like why a lot of people don't bother to memorize this stuff is because, hey, we have Google and the internet and Stack Overflow and whatever. If you just go out there and say, regex expression to validate email, like 50 geeks will have it shared, and all of them will probably work, They'll all be a little different, but they all will work. So if you do happen to grab that from somewhere else, I do ask that you cite where it came from by putting a comment in the email or in the lab, by the way. All right, I'm going to move on. All right, so that was kind of piece number one there. So that's the helper file. But now back here, we are also in the lab going to do, we are going to import the helper file, but we're not going to use that particular, well, yeah, we are going to use that particular piece. We're from helper import get email. So once you have that set up, you will add this. If you're putting the function right inside your program, Darla, you don't need that import statement.
Okay, I don't even know where in the module you put that cheat file. Is it under module 5 lab?
It's nowhere. You have to create it.
No, you just pointed to it in that you put it in our assignment.
Oh, that's back in the module.
Where in the module though? Under,
Are you watching my screen?
I am, but I was trying to find it so I could copy the code.
Yeah, you don't want to copy it from here. You should copy it from the code share page.
Oh. Okay, I already did that.
Okay. Right. I'm just pointing out that I provided it here if you ever want to reuse it.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So now let's go back and read the instructions some more. All right. So we're going to import the RE object done. We're going to get user input and create regular expressions to test the following. So I'm going to give you the code for this, so don't stress on creating it from scratch. So 5 or more letters, upper and lowercase. 4 to 6 lowercase letters and 2 numbers. And then email, which I just gave you the routine for it. And that's basically it. There's not really a lot going on here, but you can tell it's kind of a little deep, right? You know, so here's the other thing I'm going to do. Over on the code share page, I'm going to drop some comments. And I'm going to add this to my program. And if you guys want to copy those. Now, what I do ask, and I'm noticing, like when you guys highlight and you're done copying, can you please unhighlight? Because you see how unreadable it becomes? Yeah. There you go. Thank you. Right. And what I'm going to do is these are just notes that I have here. Part of them are Patrick's, part of them are mine. I'm just pasting this in. And this is kind of like, let's just call this like a crib notes for regex. And we're just putting it right inside our program, right? So the caret signals the start of a pattern. This signals the end of a pattern, right? This is a characters thing. Whatever's inside will be the characters we can use. It can be all upper, all lower, all the letters, all the numbers, all the letters, and all the numbers. You see how they have like patterns set up for all of it. And I want you guys to keep in mind, this has been around like 50, 60, 70 years now. The same exact library that they use. And it's pervasive across all programming languages, once again. The other is the quantifiers, which is how many of the previous character selection do we want. So if I wanted all alphanumeric, and then I want to designate how many. So for example, if I just want 4 letters, that's how I do it, if they're all lowercase, right? If I want 4 or more, I do 4 comma nothing. If I want 4, 5, or 6, I can set up a range 4 to 6. All right, and that's about all we really need to do our work, by the way. We're just going to give you a flavor of regex and why it's important. All right, so those are the notes, right? It saves you from typing them, basically. And we're going to first begin by prompting the user. So I'm just going to create a simple variable called user input, put up the input command, and prompt them and say 5 or more letters, please. So that's the simple prompt. Now, what we're going to do is I'm now going to set up a variable, and this is done in that helper file too, right? I'm just going to use this syntax is match, which kind of implies that we're going to have a Boolean, right? A true false value. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to type RE, call in the regular expression library, type in the command search and a set of parentheses, and then my expression is going to go inside here, right? So watch the expression. I'm going to go really slow on it initially. So we're going to put in the starts with, which is the caret symbol. And then, and I'm just going to give you guys a heads up on this. I'm going to type it in manually, but then I'm going to put it in the chat. So if you guys want to make sure you don't make a mistake, you can just hang tight and I will share it. Okay. And then I'm going to put in my square brackets to denote A to Z, all the lowercase, and all the uppercase, A to Z. Notice no spaces in between there. And then I just want, 5 or more letters, right? So that's the things that I want. It didn't say anything about numbers, right? I didn't say 5 or more letters and numbers. I just want 5 or more letters. And then I'm going to use the curly bracket, which can denote the number. So I'm going to say 5, comma, nothing, which means as many as you want, but it's 5 or more. That's how we say 5 or more. And then we end the statement with the dollar sign. Oops, the dollar sign. We're going to go outside the double quote, comma. What are we checking? We're checking the user input that we just captured. And yeah, I could put the prompt right here if I wanted, but I'm going to prompt first, and then I'm going to check. All right, here comes that statement. The whole statement's coming in the chat. That's just to keep you from making typing mistakes. Now, assuming I didn't make one. Right?
Did you put it in chat or did you put it in that website?
In the chat.
I got it. All right.
Well, let's run it. Okay. Now, what's important to note here, and I'm just going to drop this in the form of comments since I already have it typed up. So is match, what we're evaluating, really is going to hold true or false, right? Match object or none. So we treat this as a Boolean, right? But in reality, it actually technically isn't, but we think of it that way. All right, here comes the run. 5 or more letters. I'm going to type in 4. What did it do? Yeah, nothing. All right, let's try it again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, it's great. All right, so here's what's happening. We resolved the true or false, but we never asked it to put anything on the screen. We don't know if it worked. All right, so I'm kind of like teasing you a little bit here, but the whole point is this evaluated this something, but we're not seeing what it evaluated to. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to first write an if statement, and I'm going to say if is match, if true, right? So if it's true, I'll put it to the screen and say, well, that's match, which means 5 letters or more. Else, well, what would be the else to that? Well, it's not a match, basically. All right, let's try it again. So, and remember, all this is testing. Is the input valid? All right, so here comes the run. I know you guys are typing the code, so I'll scroll it a little bit. There you go. Looking into the console, I'm going to type 4 letters. It's not a match. I'll run it again. I'll type 5 letters or more. That is a match. Right. Now, this seems very simple, but think about what we just did here, right? We are setting up a pattern for input with certain parameters to it. And then based on whether or not it's valid, we're running a piece of code. Right now, we're just putting a simple message on the screen, but it could be something significantly more powerful, like writing that information to a database in a spot in the database where it's expecting it a certain way, otherwise the database breaks. So why is this stuff important? Because it ensures data integrity for applications or formats external to the program that require it, or it could be internal to the program too. Right, so this is why it's important. All right. So there was our first test. All right, so that part's done. All right. All right, now we're going to do another input. So here's my next prompt. Input 4 to 6 lowercase letters followed by 2 numbers. Okay, so this is going to have a slightly more complicated syntax. So we're going to let them do the work and put it in. Then I'm going to write a new is match statement. And we're going to do re.search parentheses. What are we checking here? We're going to check the user input. So there's going to be a comma in there and then user input, right? But now we need the regular expression here, which of course, and I don't know if you're picking up on the other part of this, regular expressions are always inside double quotes. That's how the library works, right? Now, here's the pattern. So we're going to click the caret symbol, shift to the 6 key, starts with, what is it going to start with? What is it asking for? Lowercase letters, A to Z, lowercase, right? How many of those? Well, curly brackets between 4 and 6, so 4 common 6. Followed by, now in square brackets, 2 numbers. What are the numbers? Well, the numbers go from 0 to 9. That's all the numbers. And then how many of those? Curly brackets, 2. Exactly 2. Not 1, not 3, but 2. And then it will end with that, so the dollar sign comes back. So that's the new expression. Once again, I know you guys are, I don't want you to mistype because one little character breaks the whole thing. There it is in the chat. It's my gift to you for paying tuition. Either that or you're going to sit there watching the videos in the aftermath or your screen grabs and hopefully, you know, maybe I got it wrong, you know, who knows. All right. Now, once again, we're going to check and see if it is a match. So, oh, we could just use the same code, right? Yeah, we could use the same code again. So we just copy that if statement. And then we're going to test it. Okay. Yeah, I could write a loop to put it in, whatever. But let's give you a second to catch up. So the part that we added is this. So I'm going to move that up to the top. Control S to save. I'm moving intentionally very slow. To get my YouTube channel monetized, this would be a great spot for an ad. Right? So wait 5 seconds and hit skip. Turn on your ad blocker, one or the other. Right. All right. Now I'm going to go ahead and hit run. So you still see the code on the screen. And okay, 5 or more letters. So I'm going to type a whole bunch because we know that one works, right? Now it's saying 4 to 6 lowercase letters followed by 2 numbers. Okay, there's 3 letters and 1 number. All right, we're going to do it again. 5 or more letters, easy. 4 to 6 lowercase. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, followed by 2 numbers. 3 numbers. Let's see if we can break it. Not a match. Try it again. 5 more letters. Okay. Let's do like 6 letters now. 6 letters. And 1 number, 2 numbers. And that's a match. Kind of slick, really, right? The very, very simplistic examples we're doing here, but at the same time, you can see the power of this, right? Like if you once again, especially if you're feeding it into a database or into another part of an application where the data has to be in a specific format. Or for example, what if this was the input mechanism for creating a SKU on an e-commerce system, and the SKU has to be a series of letters, a dash followed by a 6-digit number, a dash followed by a special character code, right? You could format that here, and that way when the person's entering it, you know they got it right. You know, that's the power. All right. There's another wrinkle we're going to throw in here, and that is the email piece. Now, because we included this function here, right? So everybody's got this copied. Nod and smile. Okay. We're importing this file, but you could also add this function directly to the program if you wish. That's fine. That's up to you. Right. But here, all I'm going to do to test that function is simply call it. So I'm going to call get email externally, and then I'm just going to send a prompt in, which is going to say enter a valid email address, and then we're going to test to see if it actually works. That's all the code that we do here. So one of the powers of like putting the actual processing code here is now we don't have to worry, you know, about this, like recreating this every time we want to validate an email address. Hey, we already did that. Now it's in the loop. It operates all on its own. I'll have to do any program, call the helper file, import it, call this function in, and just do it. Right? All right. So there's the prompt. I'm going to run it. And yeah, the old stuff is still going to be in there. So I have to make sure I type that stuff in correctly. 5 or more letters. No problem. Okay. And then I hit enter twice. So it wasn't a match if I hit enter. Right. Apparently that works, you know, because it said blank is not a match. Yeah, precisely. Enter key press is not a match. Right, so now we're going to do a valid email address, and I'm not. I'm just going to blah, 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 at blah, blah. And this one's in a loop. So this is kind of interesting. We could take the other things that we did and put those in a loop too, but this one's going to keep prompting me until I get it right. So can I do a number, an @ sign, and, you know, dot, is that valid? That's valid, isn't it? And notice it doesn't give you a message, it just pops out. So the anatomy of a valid email address, by the way, is any characters defined by whatever many the minimum number is of the system you're working on, right? There, some systems, you know, some domains will have a minimum of 6 characters or 4 characters or whatever. The domain controllers are in charge of that, like whoever runs that server, right? There's an @ symbol, the server name, and then the top level domain. And in the old days, we only used to have a couple top level domains. We had like .com, .gov, .mil, .edu, etc. And then about 20 years ago, they started releasing country ones, and then they started releasing custom ones. And by the way, if you have enough money and you're willing to pay, you can have whatever you want. No kidding these days, as long as you got the pockets to pay for it. And so you can find just about anything, but as long as that format is correct, it will work. So any string of characters, the @ symbol, a string of characters, dot, a string of characters. That's the format, right? And we're validating it through regex. Right. Is everybody okay?
I'm getting a squiggly line under get email.
All right. Let me pause the video here for a second and we'll do a little bit of troubleshooting on it. We're going to do this in. All right. So we're back and we're going to work on the next lab now. And let's go ahead and read the description on this. I guess I got to find it in my browser first. Right browser window. There we go. All right. So we're moving on. And this one, we're going to combine some of our skills now. So let's look at what we're going to do. documentation here is all repeat, by the way, so there's nothing fresh there. But it says create a dictionary of roles and descriptions as follows, right? So we're gonna have an administrator that does this, instructor that does this, and a student that does that. Now, to speed things up, I'm just gonna give you guys a heads up. I'm gonna be putting stuff in the code share just to accelerate our workflow here so we can get to the assignment. Just, heads up. All right, so we're gonna create a stakeholder class with the following, right? So we're gonna create a class file, right, with these properties and these methods. And then we're going to create a menu that's going to allow us to perform all of these actions. And then we're going to make sure that we validate the first and the last name, so they're letters only, and a valid email, which we've already done. This will also require a new function that we're going to add to our helper function, which, you know what, let's do that one preemptively right now to just kind of get it out of the way. So that one's going to be called get letters. That should go in your helper.py file, right? That would be the preferred way to do it. And now I'm trying to find my code share, which is here. And of course, they're giving me a nag screen here. So I'm just going to refresh. And what I'll do is I'll add that function here at the bottom. So add that to your helper.py file. So I'm going to do the same thing. Remember, after you've highlighted and copied, please be kind and unhighlight so people can see what they're copy pasting. So I'm adding that to my helper.py file, which is in the same folder as my lab files. I'm saving it. The other option, which of course we've discovered, is you can add this right to your code, but this way we're building a library.
What did you add? I'm sorry, what did you add as a helper file in blue here and highlighted on this code share?
It's the bottom function, Darla. It's this part here. This part we already did. Okay. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close my console here. So our helper.py file is updated, right? It's got the get email that we added before, and now we're doing get letters. And you can see what this one does is it's just making sure that we have letters that are entered and at least one. That's what it does, right? And it puts it in a loop. So if it's not correct, it keeps prompting us, right? So this is considered kind of like good user interface design. They screwed up. We're giving them a way to fix it, right? For how long? Until they get it right. Eventually, hopefully they get it right. All right. Now, we are going to need to create a new lab file. So here in module 5 labs, I'm going to create a new file. We're going to call it module 5 lab 4. Hi. We're going to need to do some imports. All right. So as you might anticipate, we're going to grab all of this now from the helper file, and I want very specific ones. So I'm going to import from helper. I'm going to import get email, comma, get letters, comma, and get int in range, which gives you a hint that we're also going to have, this is going to be menu driven, right? If you're hard coding the stuff in, then you have to get all of those, right? But if you've been following along with the examples, here's the helper.py file. Here's the whole thing. Here's the bottom part. And this is for all the video screenshotter people, right? All right, so they can rewind and pause to get the code. All right. The next thing that we're going to do is we're asked to set up a dictionary of the descriptions. Now I have this pre-created, so I'm going to paste it in, and I'm going to do you guys the solid here of sharing it over here. And what I'm going to do at this point is I am blowing away all this code. And so if you had it, great. If not, you're retyping. All right, so there's the dictionary. Copy, paste, unhighlight. Done. All right. And so we're just creating this just the way we were asked to. All right, so there it is. Then we're asked to build a class called stakeholder. And so I'm going to start doing that. I'm just going to call it stake. So capital S, capital H. And then we're going to add a few functions. Now, I want you guys to kind of hold on to your safety belts here, because once again, I am going to copy paste this whole thing. So if you don't want to like try to like hurriedly type it in, just take a second, pause and watch. All right, so first we'll start with an init function. Right, we have the self-referring, then we have 4 pieces of information that are sent in: first name, last name, their email address, and which role they play. So it's going to be one of those roles up here. We assign all of those to self-referring variables, so inside the object. I'm noticing my indent is a little off here, so I'm fixing that. I'm going to come down here and add the next definition, which is going to be the string method. The goal of this one is just to basically put the stuff back up on the screen for us. Remember, be patient, because I am going to copy paste this all. And then we're also going to add a get role description. This one's a little bit more complicated, but basically it will get back the definition for a role if it exists. If not, it will tell you it doesn't exist, so you can add it. So for example, if I'm like setting one and it's not there, it will allow us to see that it's not there. All right. All of this is going in the code share. There it is. I love all the colors that throws when people are highlighting it. It's like they must have sat there for years trying to figure out, well, if it's purple, we'll make it green. If it's green, we'll make it orange. If it's orange, we'll make it white. Somebody have to figure that out. Right, so that's our class definition. Some properties in there. We also have a couple of functions, methods, technically. Right, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a list of stakeholders. Now I want you to think about what I just said, right? So normally when we have a list, we put in like some names or some numbers or whatever, but nothing says that we can't put in class definitions. So check this out. I'm going to have a list of stakeholders which contains constructor call to the class to build 3 stakeholders. And yeah, I'm just using the ones that Patrick had in here. You can add information if you wish. Once again, in the code share. You guys are all doing okay? And I'm moving quickly on purpose. We want to get to the assignment, right? So there should be a nod and smile. All right. Next, we're going to go to the bottom and we're going to create our typical menu-driven structure. And so I'll start with a big old while loop set to true to run. We'll put our menu up on the screen. If you guys are anticipating I'm going to copy and paste, I'm going to do the same on this. So where we're going to slow down is when we write the functions. Because this is all repeat, right? Yeah. We'll prompt the user. To enter their choice. We'll send it to the get int and range. Our choices go from 1 to 5. 1 through 4 will do the following to match up with the menu. So we'll list the stakeholders, add a stakeholder, list the roles, and add a role. All that on CodeShare. At the very bottom. Now you're wishing I did this for every assignment, right? Yeah. Know what happens though? Like a lot of the stuff that we're doing right now, is repeat. Probably the only new wrinkle so far is really this piece here, right? Where we put the creation of objects inside of a list. That's a really powerful one, by the way. Because each one of these not only holds that data, but also carries the functions with it too. Pretty cool. All right. Let's now put the brakes on a little bit and slow down, and let's build these functions as efficiently as we can, right? Now, why this next part is important is how we build these functions will also help you build the assignment. The assignment is really, really close to what we're doing here in structure. In fact, it really is kind of a slight alteration with a little logic change. All right. So the first thing that we're going to do is I'm going to take each one of these function names and I'm going to move them up here, define them, put in a colon, and put in that pass keyword, right? I'm just going to do that for all of them. Just taking them one at a time, because I want those yellow underlines to go away. And you see the strategy I'm using is the names are pre-created below. And I'm just copy pasting them. This time I'll type def in advance. List the roles, colon, another pass. One more to go. So that's what I just created. Now remember, if you find me moving too fast, what you might want to do, I'm saying this with all sincerity, because you still have days to be able to turn this in. It might behoove you more to watch than to try to worry about catching up on typing. Right? I'm not saying that it's not possible. I'm just saying, right? The advantage, of course, of typing it here is that if you have a problem, we can look at it. But I'm going to need to kind of minimize that mode right now so we can get to the assignment. So let's take these one at a time. If we want to list the stakeholders, what does that look like? Well, I'm going to tell you what. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to print a blank line. Why? Because it'll look nicer. There's going to be some space in between the text. But if I want to print a list of stakeholders, all right, well, these are the stakeholders. It's going to be composed of objects with this information. I just want to output that. So that sounds to me like a loop. If I'm outputting the contents of a complicated structure, a loop is a good mechanism. So I'm going to say for each, I don't know, I'm going to call it SH. Why? Because that's what Patrick called it, and I'm copying his code, if you guys want to know. So for SH in stakeholders, I'm just simply going to print each one. That's going to be it, right? So I'm just putting that in parentheses. I'm going to scroll that up a little bit, and I'm going to hit the run button after I hit save. So don't panic too much. Panic just a mild amount. Right? I'm going to press 1 to see if it works. All right. It looks like it works. So it lists the person, their role, their email address, and the description. Oops. Because I scrolled past it, and the description of their role. This is pretty cool. Because what we're seeing here is that this description then is tying back up to this role description and using it as the key to pull back the definition and then output it all at once. Very cool. If you want to look at the details of the code on that, that's all right here. Notice new line and a tab stop, and then the description. That's why it's down below. All right. I'm going to hit 5 to exit. Okay, close the console. Next function. Now we want to add a stakeholder. Once again, I'm going to start with a blank line. Why? Very simply, looks nicer. So, all right. If I want to add a stakeholder, how am I going to do that? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to prompt them all for information. Now, here's where we're going to rely on our external functions a little bit. So after I print a blank line, I'm setting up a variable. And instead of just doing a regular input, I'm calling our helper function called getLetters, which does that for me, right? It's going to prompt them with whatever text I decide, which I've decided. It's going to check it against the regular expression to make sure it's valid in the format we need it, right? Upper and lowercase letters, at least one letter. It makes sense for a name, right? And then if it triggers true, we return that value back to the program. If not, we prompt again because we're in a while loop. That's the breakdown. But man, so much simpler to write it like this than to have to repeat that looping code all the time, right? You seeing the power of that? Yeah, it's super powerful. All right, and I just blew it away. Sorry. All right, next line. We're going to do the same thing for last name. Call the same function. It'll work for this one too. Enter your first name, enter your last name. Upper lowercase letters, at least one letter. Can you think of anybody that wouldn't work for? How about Prince when he was known as a symbol? That was pretty funny. All right. Then we're going to do email. We've already used this function, get email, right? So we're just prompting, enter an email. If it's valid, we move forward. If not, we don't. Right? And actually, if it's valid, what happens is it returns the email address and stores it here. All right. Now we have probably something fresh here, which is now we have to have them declare their role. I don't have a special function written for that one, right? But you could, and I'm just saying, you could set up a regular expression to test it if you want to, right? So like right now we have like administrator, instructor, and student. What other roles might you have at a school? I can think of a whole bunch, right? So we're just capturing text here. But then what we're going to do is we're going to take that and now we're going to add this to the list of stakeholders in this format where it's first name, last name, email, and the new role, right? And so we'll do it like this. We'll say stakeholders. So it's going to go into that list. We're going to add to that list. What are we going to add? A new object. Notice the object call with first name, last name, email, and role that we just captured. So this is allowing us not only to add a stakeholder, but to add their role. So in principle, we could add a new role here, but probably somebody will choose one that pre-exists. All right. Let's test it. I am saving, scrolling ever so slightly so you can still see that function. And I'm going to hit run. Pull the console up ever so slightly. Click in there. Let's first do a list. Looks good. Let's add a stakeholder. Press number 2. First name. I guess I'll put my name in there. Email. My nonsense email. YASDF. Those are the first 4 keys on my left hand. And then the role. How about advisor? That's a role out of school. Right. Well, actually, you know what? I'm an instructor, whatever. We'll do the advisor thing later when we add a role. All right. Now let's list again. And there I am with my nonsense email and everything. Pulls the description from instructor, which is already pre-created. Pretty nifty. All right. Press 5 to exit. So your code stops. All right. A couple more to build here. Now we're going to need to list the roles, right? So why would you list the roles? You would list the roles if you intend to change them or add one, right? You don't want to add one that's already there because the dictionary doesn't allow for that. So let's start once again by printing a blank line. Why? Because it looks nice. And then we're going to use that items function to pull back all the roles that are currently there. So I'm going to say for each role and description. That's how I kind of say that, by the way, that are inside the roles description list, right? Or excuse me, dictionary. We're going to run the items function so we can extract both pieces of information. And then we're just going to have a very simple printf command. We're going to say print f for string interpolation, and we're going to have it output the role like administrator, followed by a colon, a space, and then the description. Pretty darn simple. I'm going to roll it to the top, hit save. I'm running it to test it. All right. So now we just want to see if list roles pulls back the list. All right, so here goes 3. Oops, got 3 in the code. Sorry, 3 down here. Did it work? It sure did. So administrator, description, instructor, description, student, description. That happened with very, very little code. Pretty simple, really, you know, when you stop and think about it. One more function to write here. Now we're going to add a role. So this is like, oh, hey, we got a different kind of employee, right? Once again, blank line. And we're going to ask, right? Well, didn't we do that before? We asked, hey, input what role it is you want to do. So let's just copy that one. No reason to recreate it. It's already there. We also, because it's a new role, right? New role is going to need a new description. So here comes the description. So let's create a variable called description. We'll prompt for it. We'll store it. Once we have both pieces of information, then all we have to do is get that added to the dictionary. And if you remember, the syntax for that is actually pretty simple, right? We just call the dictionary by name, feed in the new key value, which will be what they typed in, advisor, for example, and then a description of what that role does. And now it's captured and entered into the dictionary. And then just to make sure it is, we'll call the other function from above, list roles with parentheses, to make sure it got added. So we'll add it, then we'll spit it back up on the screen. Aha, yeah, it works. All right, I'll give you guys a second to catch up. Scrolling as slowly as I can. Control S to save. And I'm going to run it again. Expanding the console. I think what happened here is I never quit the last time, so I'm going to quit and run it again. So let's do that again. All right, here we go. All right, so we know 1 and 2 work because we've used them. We know 3 works because we've used it. For right now, our only real concern is number 4, correct? Right, okay. So I'm going to type in 4. It's going to ask me for the role. I'm going to say advisor. Description helps students sign up for their classes. Then when I'm done, it adds it, and then it puts the description back up on the list. So now if I want to add a stakeholder that's an advisor, I can do that. So for example, I could hit 2, first name, Joe Smith, email, jsmith@wctc.edu, role, oops, screw that one up, advisor. Now this list the stakeholders. And there you can see Joe is added as an advisor, his email address, and the correct description underneath. All right. So folks, that is the completed lab number 4. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to pause this, and we have a little bit, I'm going to say 5 minutes of time where we can look at errors if you're having them, because I know I moved really fast. So video is now paused. All right. I think everybody's had a chance to copy in the code, but just for those watching online, I'm going to kind of scroll through this slowly. So we have our imports up at the top, dictionary that we defined, a class structure that we defined. That's lines 1 through 24. Then we set up a list of stakeholder objects. Then we set up our 4 functions, which should hopefully fit on the screen there. Those are the 4 functions that list the stakeholders, add the stakeholders, list all the roles, and then add new roles. That's through line 54. And then finally, the while loop at the bottom that drives the whole thing. And then please keep in mind that import that we have up at the top, that's a file that we've created. This file should be in the same folder as the file you're building. That's got these functions in it. It does import regex. This one we're not using here, but we are using the other 3. So here's get int and range, get email, and then finally get letters. And basically these just give us the ability to prompt the users for information, make sure it's in the right format. If it's not, it keeps asking until it is. When it's correct, it returns the value back to the program so we can move forward. It just takes a lot of overhead off the program. We do it in an external file, but you could also grab these functions and just add them to your code. That works as well. I would prefer that you do the separate file. All right, folks, that's the solution for lab 4. This video will end here. Please make sure you subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next video.